Okay, Andy, tell me about your idea of always adventure. What does that mean?
It's really born out of an awareness around kind of challenges that I think people were facing and face um, kind of midlife, where they've spent all this time pouring into work and family and doing all the things that they thought that they were supposed to be doing, but then something's missing. And, I had kind of experienced that and I wanted to do something to make a difference in the world. So I kind of searched for a way to do that.
Awesome. So tell me about the experience of writing your book, Always Adventure, and kind of what came out of that experience.
The experience, I had a great coach, which was very helpful. Prior to that, some things that people don't know. I'm a total homebody. Um, I'm a creature of habit. So, right, those are not connotations when you think of adventure. And I am perfectly willing to hang out at home for long stretches of time. Really, and nobody needs to come visit. But there's a need for connection, right? There's a need for joy in our life, things that kind of stir our spirit and our soul. And that's really what the book's about. But I also weave a lot of my own life in there. And and I've derived some outcomes through some practices that I've kind of picked up along the way that are I found to be helpful.
Awesome. So let's go just a little into the framework of always adventure and how that concept can transform people's lives.
Yeah. Well, so to answer the question about the book, because I don't know if my last statement actually answered your question, and I'll tell you that it was the experience of writing the book was faster than I anticipated. I had a process that I went through. I wrote the book in 11 weeks and 2.5 days. It's what I would kind of consider like a proper book. I know that there's other books, but it's 55,000 words. It's really consumable. It's 216 pages and share a lot of my life stories and bring in these practices and kind of support a lot of that conversation through research into behavioral science and so forth. So it was challenging in that it was very vulnerable. I was nervous to share so much of myself in the book. And so there were pieces of that were really scary for me to write and share so openly. So that part was really, really difficult. And a little truth on that was that I had never read my own book prior to publishing it. So just kind of,
Wow.
I really had to trust my coach and my editing team. And that took a lot of out of me to just really trust like that. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what was
And
your
then
next question?
yeah, no, I mean, tell me about that going through that process, getting that all out. You were talking about how you were going through this yourself, and I imagine kind of integrating that into your life as you were developing this. Like, tell me about that transformation for you and how you hope to bring that to other people as well.
Yeah, well, it was born out of right, my relationship to adventure and these, by definition, an adventure is getting uncomfortable and exploring the unknown and seeking excitement. I had gone through my own experience, kind of a dark night of the soul experience as a single father and as a father who eventually did later remarry. And I was introduced to experiential learning, which couples very nicely to having these experiences. And I've been told a lot in my life, man, you've had a lot of experiences, despite my creature of habitness and my being a homebody, which people probably would not suspect. But and I wanted to organize. My book writing coach really helped me to organize the story arc and to be able to organize that, what that whole cadence of what that story looked like. And then I had specific stories from my life that I really connected to each of these kind of practices that I related to from adventure. And so that's how it's coupled and paired, and that's how the story is woven is kind of chronological, experiential, and lessons learned.
That's great. I love hearing about the homebody side of you because you're right. Like knowing you on the other side of the book, that's not that's not the impression that I get of you, Andy. And so it's fun to kind of talk about and hear. But one thing I admire about you and working with you is that you really live this always adventure. You live the things that you're talking and they get integrated into your life. And a big example of this is this trip that you just went on to the Grand Canyon. Can you give me a high level of what that trip was?
Well, high level is kind of a funny thing considering the Grand Canyon is a mile and a half, 1.5, 1.8 miles deep. And we went down the river. We were in the river for 7 days, 6 nights. There was 26 friends and family and their families. People would probably think that something like this was not just a whitewater rafting trip. I would consider it like a full-blown like an expedition. We really explored the canyon. Now people have found and discovered these places before, so it's not a full-blown expedition, but it was a big experience. And this was actually my wife's dream and not mine. And if you knew her, you would not necessarily think that she's this big adventurous soul, but she really is. And it was, I don't even know if she actually asked if I wanted to go when she's put down the deposit. So it's really kind of her baby. And we did this together with our son and friends. And it was 188 miles, two boats, 26 people, over 60 rapids. 7 days and 6 nights that culminated in a helicopter ride out of the canyon.
Wow, that is quite an experience.
Yeah.
So going into this, tell me about your thought process going into it, how you were preparing, what you maybe weren't prepared for that you thought you were prepared for.
Yeah. How I was preparing was making sure that our bodies were flexible and strong. And so just physically, some of the prep was just making sure we exercised. I like a pretty strong advocate of just stretching kind of all the time, just a little bit. Not a yoga person. My wife is. So I'm kind of a bulkier guy. And so, but I do stretch every morning and every night. And so really just that kind of work and just moving our bodies and preparing ourselves for really the biggest challenge was loading and unloading the boats every day.
Mm.
And we call these fire lines. And so we'd all get in a line on the two boats and just unpack all the cots and gear and kitchen and food, everything, sleeping bags, everything. You had to do it every night. And you had to do it every morning because you're going back down the river. You're not going to be back.
Yeah.
So I was probably most nervous. A lot of these people were really kind of my wife's group of friends. I'm friends with them too, but I didn't know how that was all going to go being with these people in such a day in and day out for 7 days straight. So
Yeah.
certainly I like people and I love a lot of these people, but some people I didn't know. And so I just wasn't sure. And believe it or not, again, it just caused me some anxiety.
Yeah.
So I was just nervous about that. I wasn't sure how it would work out, being so kind of close with people for that long, people I didn't know.
Yeah. That's
Um,
quite an experience to share, and you're going through uncomfortable physical experiences with the social experiences. That's a lot in one.
yeah, you get close. Barriers
Mhm.
come down.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
That's great.
Some of what was really kind of fascinating too that you weren't really prepared for, but that was a surprise. The other part of your question was that it was really hot. And so, I mean, you took a bath in the river every day. It was 55-degree water, and that's how you bathed. It was just running river, and you had a bar of soap, and that's where you took a bath. At night, most nights it was 100 degrees. And so you soaked your blanket in that river water and you slept with a wet blanket on to keep your core body temperature down and to make sure your body stayed hydrated. And so water was critical just to not overheating and or heat exhaustion, right? So that was a big part of the experience.
Wow, that is just quite a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it
Tell
was.
me, I'm sure the days had some variation, but tell me a little bit more about what your day to day looked like, what the things that you were actually doing as you were going through this.
So I'll just, in the morning, right? You wake up. One of the things that was exceptional outside of being in the Grand Canyon and learning so much about it, our guides were seasoned veterans. It was as if we had the canyon to ourselves. We saw very few others. We got the choice of the locations that we were really wanting to go. And every time we went to that location, there was no one else around. And so we did pass a few boats along the way, but really got the prime spots that we were, our guides were looking for and wanting to take us, and everything that was like the best opportunity. The hope was that the river, Little Colorado was running blue, and sure enough it was, and there was no one else there. And so things of that nature were really exceptional. We'd wake up in the morning. Thing that was always a surprise. They were exceptional camp chefs. They made amazing meals every morning. So they had a conch shell and they would blow it, and you knew that your cowboy coffee was ready. And then, like a half hour later, the conch shell would blow again, and you knew that breakfast was ready. And you'd kind of carry your camp chair over, and everybody would kind of get prepared for breakfast, and you'd form a line and have breakfast, and the food was exceptional.
I love that. That's great.
So in a period of time, another thing is what you bring in comes with you, and you would kind of use the bathroom in a metal can. One was in the river, but other options were not in the river, and you have this metal can, and that's where you use the bathroom. And it was the fun part about that was that it always had a great view, had a little toilet seat on this big metal can, and it was a very unusual experience, but it was kind of funny. I mean, everybody's relationship to this going to the bathroom was something so simple, but it always had this amazing view, and that was always funny.
That's not something you think about when you're going into a trip like
No,
this.
no, but that was part of reality, and
Yeah.
it was
Uh,
an uncomfortable conversation at some point. You didn't really probably, it was a non-issue. You just
yeah.
kind of get used to it, but at first you're going, "What's happening?" Okay, so that's what we're doing.
Nothing to bring a bunch of different people together, like, having an amazing view and an interesting experience going to the bathroom.
Yeah, there's two. One was in like its little tent thing, and one was not. One was kind of had this amazing view, and if the paddle was missing, you knew that the bathroom was occupied, and the paddle was there, you knew that it was not occupied. So
Love it.
that was kind of part of the morning routine, right? Like you wake up, have some coffee, so the sun's up, and they were early mornings. The morning started around 5 a.m. Every morning. So the sun was up, time to have some coffee, get ready. It was a casual pace. But it's time to be ready, and there's plenty of kind of space in the day. It was well planned, and then it was fire line all the gear back onto the boats, and the crew would kind of button the hatches, if you will, make sure everything was secure. And here we go, going for another stretch of the day down the river.
Dang. Okay. And
Yeah.
then the evenings, tell me, I think you shared a little more details about the sleeping situation and how you guys were all set up, and then the wet blankets and everything. Can you tell me a little bit more there?
Yeah, the days were always filled with, there's some white water. We hit a lot of rapids. We hiked a lot and discovered beautiful aspects of the canyon. And at the end of the day, and we'd stop for a great lunch. And in the day, it's typically quite hot. You're ready to be in the water and wind down. And we found a spot. They're all very different. And some kind of beaches or locations were more sparse, and you could kind of spread out, and some you were kind of tight. You still had some space, but if you just think of simple things like changing clothes at the end of the day and things of that nature, you really kind of had to get creative with how that happened.
Yeah.
All the women had kind of these ponchos that they changed underneath, and the guys would just kind of try to find a bush or something, and, and it really typically started with winding down with like sitting in the river. You got pretty used to that really cold water, and you kind of wanted to spend some time in it after a really hot day.
Wow.
And and then the guides would be making dinner, and so we'd wind down, kind of hang out, talk about the day, and then they would make. I mean, we had delicious fish. We had a steak dinner. We had right? Just all kinds of
Dang.
amazing meals that were really quite remarkable. So it's kind of a highlight, to be honest. I don't know how they learned to cook like that. They made cakes, literally two whole cakes. Like,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
we had bananas Foster. Like,
Wow.
yeah, when we had bananas Foster, like, and they caught it on fire and the whole thing, and they had ice cream, and that was day 5, with ice cream. So they had dry ice, keeping things cold, and it was really quite something. So we'd all again kind of form a circle with our chairs, and the conversations would naturally start to flow, and just talking about the day, and we'd just hang out for a little bit, and once the sun was down, it didn't take long before you were ready to just hit your cot. And so, you would unload your boat, and that would all start. And so you always were looking for that prime spot to set up your cot, somewhere along the riverbank.
Hmm. Yeah, and then sleeping with a wet blanket tucked all around you.
Yeah, yeah. You definitely needed to stay cool because it was hot. We did go through kind of a sand and windstorm one night, so
Mm.
there wasn't much sleeping going on then. And so I was completely wrapped, had a wet towel wrapped around my head and my body, and just enveloped myself in this wet blanket. And in the morning, everybody kind of was assessing the scenario, and things were blowing all over the place and
Oh,
shaking out the sand. And that was probably the most rough night, but
yeah.
generally you enjoyed being able to look up at the stars and take in sleeping out in nature. So
Yeah. That's quite an experience. That's great.
yeah.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about always adventure and bring it into the scope of this experience and talk about some of the specific instances from that perspective. So just backing up a little bit with always adventure, I think initially when you hear the concept of always adventure, uh people might take it a little more as like the yes man experience of just always doing the most extreme thing and how intense can you be, and there's obviously elements of the intensity of adventure in there and being outside and doing wild things and pushing yourself as this story shows about the grand adventure, but I feel like it's also about the minute details, about the social aspects and the conversations and the how hard it is, the challenges that you go through when you're experiencing adventure and what that does for you in transformation. Does that feel accurate to you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, part of the work that I've tried to do is take the aspects of how an everyday, how those big adventures, or even simple, even any kind of like challenge, how that impacts you directly, and take those and make them relevant to everyday life.
Hmm.
And embrace adventure as kind of a lifestyle, of a way we kind of take on life and engage with life, and how do we connect with others, and how to be more present, um, and accepting, and things of that nature. So that's been
Yeah,
part of the effort, is to derive a lot of the values that come with a big adventure and make them relevant to everyday life.
love that. Okay, so with that scope, tell me a little bit about the parts of this trip that stood out from there, things that were particularly challenging, things that were particularly beautiful, with you and with other people. Just, I'd love to hear some highlights.
Yeah, well, challenging is, I mean, one of the things that stands out for me is, there was a hike, and I had never had this happen before, but the hike was 720 feet high, and he called it the Butt Buster. And I'm always up for some physical challenge. Like, yeah, let's go hike this thing. And everybody was game, and let's go hike this thing. And the idea was that up high, 720 feet high, there are these 3 kind of grain stores that the Navajo Indians had put into the wall of the mountain, and to protect their grain from the rival tribes. I believe it was the Apache at that time, and so they were protecting their source, their nutrient source or food source. And so he didn't say a lot about what it was going to be like up there. And right, the least adventurous person. I'm a homebody, like I'm a creature of habit. I go to my same place for lunch every day, and I eat the same thing. And I also have a fear of heights. And so I typically always embraced that and just did whatever I needed to do. And it made me very nervous, but I would do it. Well, we hike up this, and it was a lot of work. To give you an idea of how high that is to climb up, it's around 70 stories. And so if a story is 10 feet, that's a flight of stairs. That's over 70 flights of stairs. So that was and it's straight up.
Yeah.
And so you're Yeah, and they're not all the same. It's not like you can get into a cadence. The path is laid very unpredictably, and some big steps and some smaller steps. So you're really there's no rhythm. You're just hiking, kind of
Mhm.
mountaineering style. And what was interesting to me was that when we got up there, um, the Grand Canyon, the scale of it, I had never experienced before. Right? Nowhere else had I ever been where you could see straight up a mile and a half and you knew that that was 1.5 miles or 1.8 miles. So that's right. And so it's just huge.
Mhm.
And then you look down and you can barely see the rafts that are, tied up down at the beach. And then you have this long river. So, and then you have this rock that you're kind of standing on. And, if I showed you the photos, you'd go, what were you thinking? Well, our guide didn't really say much about when we got up there, how narrow the path would become. And so if you slipped, like if you got off balance or tripped, it was 720 feet straight down. You would not survive it. Impossible. It wouldn't happen. And so and then they scaled up another face to look in those food stores in the side of the mountain. And it was like you're straight up these very narrow little ledges that you're scaling. And so I climbed up some of that. And I was right almost up to the top. It was full, everybody's sitting down. And there was like another ledge at the top where you could stand and kind of lean back. And I remember for the first time in my life, I don't get seasick, love the ocean. It's a lot of time on the ocean. It was the first time in my life I've ever gotten disoriented. And I felt like, oh no, I'm getting dizzy because I guess in my brain, it could not orient itself with these huge distinctions in height and depth. And so I just had to kind of calm down a little bit and hold on to the rock and just kind of stay focused on the strength of the rock beneath me to try to stabilize myself. And that was just one experience that I felt like, oh, oh, that was really kind of sketchy.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for that. And later he would prepare us for a more sketchy hike later, and then
Wow.
I was prepared for that one and did that.
Oh man, and you just went for it. Good for you, Andy. That's impressive.
That one I was could get my mindset ready. I did
Yeah.
some breath work and really prepared
Yeah.
myself for that ledge, and I had no problem whatsoever for that stretch of a ledge that was quite dangerous.
That is really interesting. I feel like this could parallel a lot into our lives, into our business journeys where we have adventures or challenges, and some of them you can prepare for and get your mindset wrapped around it and go into it with a certain mentality. And some of them just happen to us and they kind of knock us on our butt a little bit for a minute, but then we can sit down, regroup, and hopefully have the tools to move forward in the right way.
I think I really like what you're taking away and hearing because I think that's exactly right. I mean, I say the through line in the whole book is life doesn't always turn out the way we think, but it can turn out even better than we ever imagined if we let it. And I think that all too often what happens is we have some sort of experience that we didn't expect and it shocks our nervous system and we don't like it. And so then we never do it again.
Mm.
And what I like about what you're taking away and what I think maybe is something I'm kind of proud of is that I had never been disoriented in my life. I did that first hike. It scared the mess out of me. Um, and I was pretty vocal. I was pretty like, oh crap, I'm getting dizzy.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
pretty, it was clear that Andy was uncomfortable. And, he warned us over the next one that was even more narrow. And, but I just did the work to be better prepared and to adjust and ready myself and didn't not do the next one. I fully embraced and prepared myself. And thank goodness, because on the other side of it was this stunning oasis of a place that I thoroughly enjoyed and was stunningly beautiful.
Oh man, I love that. Great metaphor for life and wonderful experience. Tell me a little bit about the challenges from the social aspect and some of the treasures that came from that experience, some of the conversations you were able to have.
Yeah, I think that I love connecting with people, and it's probably the joy of my life when I get to just connect in any kind of preconceived notions or barriers. Those come down, already gaps. Those come down. And I think that we're all very, very different. At our core, I think we're all far more similar than sometimes we give ourselves the ability to realize, the opportunity to realize. And part of getting uncomfortable and exploring the unknown are two things that I talk a lot about. That happened on the trip where you start to have these really honest conversations, and on more than one occasion, it was experiences that were being shared with me that other fathers were having, not just as fathers, but as just individuals, and some of the challenges. And I would have never guessed or thought or knew that that person was going through anything like that. And so some of that stuff I really enjoyed. And then the shifts that took place as well, where at one point I thought I was kind of being treated in a certain way, and then finally that kind of shifted, and to more of a connection. And so I really enjoyed kind of those two things of watching those relationships shift in healthy ways and in positive ways, and not through any effort or intention. It's just the way that having an intimate view, having a shared experience over the course of time, I think that those bonds are inevitable. And I thought that was a beautiful piece of it.
Yeah, yeah. I again kind of bringing that into the work you do with your business. I think taking people on adventures, creating these experiences, and then the process of going through them together. Because in life, a lot of the times we're going through these things by ourselves, and we're looking for someone to support us, someone to share that experience with. And it's always a powerful thing on its own to go through it individually. But then when you go through something like this with other people, there is just this level of connection and bonding that is hard to create anywhere else, and it adds to the adventure and the experience so much more. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how you're trying to kind of foster that in the work you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the encouragement is, we kind of touched on it before, where just because something happened once doesn't mean that, and the outcome might not have been great, doesn't mean not to do it again. Just because our experience of a certain person maybe was bad, it doesn't mean that it's always, that's just who they are forever. And so one of the things that I'm a passionate believer in is in the best of people. And so, I'm not always the best version of myself. And so just because I give people a little grace, and be hurt, be willing to have an unmet expectation. It doesn't mean don't engage. Living in a box and in a bubble is just no way to be. And life's filled with ups and downs. Feel those downs, and I think that the reciprocal is also true, or the opposite is also true, where the highs are really rich and rewarding as well. And so, I think in the work of intimate view, having a shared experience over the course of time. I think that in the world, we all, particularly in this hyper-connected world, really kind of starve a little bit for some connection, meaningful conversations. And having these experiences really provide the opportunity to do that.
I love that, Andy. I definitely agree. Well, is there any other stories or big takeaways from the Grand Canyon experience that you want to share before we close this out today?
From the canyon, nature. I think that two things come to mind. Less pretty, more primal, right? Like just less pretty and more primal. The idea of putting on that mask every day when we go out into the world, that's kind of what pretty to me is like. And more primal is just being more connected to who you really are and owning it. Yeah, and be proud of who you are, like being willing to love yourself. Less pretty, more primal, connected to who you are, and out in nature is really a great opportunity to do that. And I think that it's important for us to slow down enough and give ourselves the space and the healthy boundary to take the time to get out in nature a little bit, to really connect with ourselves, and with the universe, with higher power, with God, and we come back, I think, just a better version of ourselves. That's maybe a little less pretty, a little more primal, and our primal selves are, I think, the most beautiful version of ourselves.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I feel like people have a hard time stepping away from work sometimes. In the risk that's they need to get the things done. They need to think through the things. And my experience is when I step away into nature, it takes 10 minutes for my body to relax physically, my mind to relax, and all of these ideas flood. Like there's clarity in ways that I've been struggling through with work for weeks, and all of a sudden it's there. So it feels so good for the work aspect even too, to take that time to be in that more raw, natural state.
100%. I remember a mentor talking about sharing a quote. I think it was, Gandhi or Buddha or somebody was, you know, um, I have twice as much work to do today. I guess that means that I need to meditate for twice as long.
Oh, love
Um,
that.
right? Slowing down to speed
So
up.
good.
Yeah. And
Uh,
it really helps us. We're more productive when we actually slow down and center and prepare ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for sharing about your experience, Andy. I think that is just such a cool thing that you went out and did. And I love hearing all the background. When you hear somebody like hiked through the Grand Canyon, rafted in the Grand Canyon, you don't get to hear the story, the things that go into that experience and the uncomfortableness that comes out of it. So I love being able to dive into that with you.
I'll tell you, the water was powerful, and it was really the re-entry was a shock to the system. Coming back into Vegas to get the flight home and all the lights and sounds, and that was really something else. So thanks for
Yeah.
having the conversation, and I could have conversations like this all day long. So thanks for having.
Absolutely. That actually that leaves me one more question there. As you kind of come into that, because I've had this experience too, where you go out, have this amazing experience, and then you're back in the rush of like, ah. Do you have tips for holding on to the magic of that experience and trying to keep it integrated into your day?
The only tip that I would think of is to allow the time, maybe give yourself some space upon reentry, if you will, so that you're not just stepping straight back into work. I think that it's good to kind of marinate in that afterglow
Yeah,
for a little bit to really let that whole experience kind of sink in, and you get the kind of healthy amount of time to be with it at the end of it instead of just rushing on to what's next and all the responsibilities and the doing of day-to-day life. So, schedule that in so that you have some time to really be with it.
love it. Okay. Thanks so much, Andy. I appreciate it.